think maybe we're getting somewhere. Always fun. It says we're live. We're going to try it. All right. Welcome, everyone, to this week's edition of the AARC Ambulatory and Post-Acute Care Section Open Office Hours. My name is Mike Hess. I am a respiratory therapist, and I am the chair of the AARC Ambulatory and Post-Acute Care Membership Section, where we cover a great deal of the respiratory world, including pulmonary rehabilitation. So happy Pulmonary Rehabilitation Week. DME, home care, care navigation, skilled nursing facilities, long-term acute care. We do a lot, and so really trying to grow the section, improve some interaction, all that kind of stuff, and try to have a good time while we're doing it. The biggest news we have right now is this was actually a pretty big week. It's been a pretty big couple of weeks for the oxygen therapy community. Notably, last week, and the reason we didn't have office hours last week was because I was traveling to Washington, D.C. In my day job with the COPD Foundation to advocate on behalf of people, including RTs, and we'll get to that in a minute, in the oxygen therapy community to try and reform how oxygen therapy is provided in the long-term, the ambulatory care setting. It was a great experience. Again, no matter what one's current feelings are about current goings on in Washington, Congress in general, whatever, it's a really cool city with a lot of fantastic history. And it was just really nice to have an opportunity to be there to, if nothing else, to see the architecture and really live the history a bit. But we did actually do some good. We had about 80 advocates all together. Rolling into town, and we had a couple hundred meetings, most of which were reported out to be fairly positive. So several of the things we're advocating for, if you're not familiar, last session of Congress, we were trying to get an act passed called the Supplemental Oxygen Access Reform, or SOAR Act. And basically what that bill would do, it had a couple of different components to it. The most commonly described one was to really bring oxygen therapy into more of a patient-centric or person-oriented model. Because over the last 40 years or so, we've really seen some significant cuts in how Medicare, or what Medicare will reimburse for oxygen equipment, which has really put a huge damper on the durable medical equipment industry, all the way from manufacturers who aren't really seeing a lot of return on investment in many cases for R&D, all the way down to suppliers who have had to cut back on the types of equipment they can provide, the education they can provide, all those sorts of things. It's really been something of a disaster, honestly, for the community top to bottom. And so we're trying to fix that. In addition to that, I mentioned the educational component. Part of the SOAR Act would be for the first time to actually reimburse companies for sending a respiratory therapist out into the home to help people who are maybe new to oxygen equipment actually understand how to use their stuff. Right now the model is usually a delivery driver. Actually, more often than people are being taught by a clinician, they're being taught by nobody. So it's really unfortunate when people just don't know how to use their equipment. They're not really getting their maximum benefit from it, not really able to use it to its fullest. And that also leads to important things for the community. A few weeks back, I was actually my kids hadn't seen this video yet, so I was sharing it with them in the last couple of days. There was in Ohio, there was a person, a garbage collector, who was almost very seriously injured. Fortunately, was able to dodge out of the way in time. But somebody had thrown away a partially filled oxygen cylinder into their curbside trash. And of course, when that went into the garbage truck, and the garbage truck did its thing, tried to compress it, the tank exploded and took out a a lot of the back of the garbage truck. Again, fortunately, the collector was off to the side, and wasn't injured. But again, it speaks to the level of education that people are not getting. I mean, I know accidents happen and all, but it's kind of a basic thing. We don't want we want people to return their empties and all that kind of stuff. So we really need to make sure that we're doing a better job at providing that kind of education. In order to do that, obviously, of course, I'm a little biased, but I think one of the best groups to do that is respiratory therapists. And so the SOAR Act would actually allow companies to do that and really work out best for the community. That will also hopefully generate some additional career paths, again, in our ambulatory and post-acute care space, and really continue to push against the idea that we hear a lot that there's really nothing to do in this profession outside of going to the bedside or teaching or getting into sales or things like that. There really are, there's a wide world of opportunity out there, but the SOAR Act would help us improve that significantly. And then the final major component of this would be to make it easier to prescribe oxygen, and to make sure that prescribers and suppliers are really more on the same page. Historically, when oxygen has been ordered, it's required a written order, and then it's also required a certificate of medical necessity, and a lot of paperwork. And if one thing isn't checked off right, then that can really disrupt the care coordination with that. A couple of years ago now, they actually did away with that certificate of medical necessity, but ended up putting it into more of a chart review model. And again, it's a lot easier to miss something on a chart than it is to miss something to check a box. So you can certainly see where there's a lot more, the intent was pure probably, but the outcome has been to actually make things probably a little more complicated. And so what we want to see as part of the SOAR Act is to standardize the documentation, hopefully make it electronic. Since this is actually the 21st century, it might not have flying cars, but we should have electronic ordering across the continuum of care. And then also we want to see that, again, that will also help us fight against fraud and abuse and waste and all that kind of stuff. So that was the big news going on. And then, of course, there's also a lot of other things that are happening. Before I get too much into that, I do want to share a couple of different links here. We are live, hypothetically at least, on, for the first time, Facebook this time around, as well as LinkedIn and YouTube. And so I'm going to put links into the various chats here, because we're also broadcasting this from Zoom. So if you want to join the conversation, obviously you're welcome to hop on to the comments there underneath whatever window you are looking at, whether it's Facebook or YouTube or LinkedIn. Or of course you are also welcome to come join in on the Zoom. And this will be also available for folks to catch up on after the fact. A couple other big things going on with oxygen. We've talked about this a couple of different times now. I think the Lancet Global Health Commission on Medical Oxygen Security recently released a comprehensive report on the state of medical oxygen around the world. This particular article was heavily focused on low and middle income countries, because those are arguably where the most significant barriers lie. Again, I said arguably because there are obviously a lot of issues not only in the U.S. but even in the U.K. and Europe, Australia. Again, globally speaking, oxygen therapy has not really received much of a priority from anybody, and this Lancet Commission report is really setting out to change that. Let's see, we're about to publish, might even be published when you watch this, depending on when you're catching it on the live show or not. There is a complimentary piece that a group of us put together that focuses a little bit more on the long-term aspects of it. Again, because of the overall state of oxygen therapy, a lot of the report was focused on the acute care setting, because one of the things that has shocked me about a lot of this is there are places out there that actually don't even use pulse oximetry routinely. I mean, again, here, whether you're in the hospital or not, pulse oximetry is kind of a given. You're monitoring your care through the use of this tool, but unfortunately, that's not always the case, and is actually rarely the case, depending in certain parts of the world. So, because of that, this report really focused on that acute care infrastructure. But there is, along with that, there have been some invited commentaries. I'm looking at it right now, and actually, I will put that into the chats as well. I really like the fact that I have especially now that it's figured out, I have a piece of software that lets me stream to a variety of sources, but I don't have unified comments, which is still kind of a bummer, but working on that a little bit. So along with this article are some invited commentaries that cover things like, is medical oxygen a necessity or a luxury in humanitarian settings? How industry can contribute to increasing access, embedding nurses, because unfortunately we don't have RTs everywhere, biomedical engineers, all those sorts of things. And about to be published is also our commentary about the issues facing the long-term oxygen therapy community. So look for that. That's a very exciting thing. We're going to be in next month. We're going to be starting and we're hosting a monthly call that is actually global in focus, where all folks who are working on oxygen stuff can collaborate and can discuss their projects and find some synergies and find some other areas for collaboration. This was something that actually grew out of an effort that was part of the build-up to the Lancet Commission report, and you're really sharing a lot of that those projects. But we really do see a need to continue that, so we're very excited to be starting that on April 2nd, which coincidentally is also the start of a 6-month countdown to World Oxygen Day on October 2nd. This is the 3rd year we're going to be doing World Oxygen Day. Hopefully going to expand that out even more, so please feel free to contact me either again through the chat or my email, mhessrrt@gmail.com, and I would love to give you some more information about all things oxygen. All right, so with all of that said, let's now take a look at, let's see what we got going on here. Let's take a look at what else is going on in the world of chronic respiratory disease. So I did mention also that this is Pulmonary Rehabilitation Week. So again, I want to send a very, very big thank you to all the folks, the therapists out there who are working in the pulmonary rehabilitation setting. You guys are, arguably, nobody really knows RTs, and nobody knows. Even fewer people know the RTs that work in pulmonary rehab. It's kind of like the hidden of the hidden of the hidden. So really appreciate all the work that you do, because what you do is invaluable to making sure that our patients in this community have an excellent quality of life, or at least as good as we can possibly make it through not only exercise, but teaching them how to manage their symptoms, how to manage their diet, how to manage an exercise routine outside of the pulmonary rehab setting, and how to manage the social and mental issues that go into dealing with chronic respiratory disease. And again, we largely focus on COPD in the pulmonary rehabilitation setting because that's where the biggest body of evidence sits right now. But we want to build out other parts of that, bronchiectasis, pulmonary fibrosis. We know that there's we know kind of viscerally that there's a lot of impact that can be had there. But what we need that evidence to help support policy reform and access reform and all those sorts of things. So really excited to again build out some of these networks and really do see what we can do over the next year or two to raise the profile of pulmonary rehabilitation, because again, that's something that we've been fighting for years, but if trying to get all of our ducks in a row and row the boat together to make that happen. So let's see. So let's go back to let's see. Let's take a look at, I haven't heard any updates on the Pope recently. I know it's not necessarily a post-acute setting, although wait, Mark's 12th anniversary as head of the Catholic Church with cake and candles. He's got his 29th consecutive day in the hospital, unfortunately, so he is still ailing a bit. Sorry. Cats are kind of going crazy in the other room right now. So the interest for this is on the oxygen side of things. He's been up and down, off and on, of various forms of oxygen therapy, supplemental oxygen, as he's recovering from pneumonia. Let's see, it looks like as of, was this yesterday? No, this is today. On ABC News, it says he continues to undergo high-flow oxygen therapy during the day and non-invasive mechanical ventilation during his night rest. So, certainly we hope he continues on the road to recovery from bilateral pneumonia. And again, more evidence that everybody needs oxygen. Some bodies just need a little bit more, even when you're the Pope. All right, let's take a look at what's new in COPD news this week, if anything. Arthritis and COPD together raise mortality risk. That's a new study that came out from the COPD Foundation. How about that? Higher risk of people with COPD and arthritis have a higher risk of death than people with arthritis who do not have COPD, according to a new study. In our January issue of the COPD Journal. Let's see. There's a significant association at the synopsis here. I don't necessarily see a rationale behind it, but it stands to reason. I mean, both of those are inflammatory conditions, so it makes sense that one inflammatory condition is going to exacerbate another. So that will be interesting to keep an eye on as we go forward. Let's see. We had a new issue of Respiratory Care Journal since we spoke last. Take a look at. Still working on navigating the new website here. Highlights are, of course, submit your 2025 open forum abstracts. The guideline or the application portal is open from now until June 1st. Put a link on that. So if you are doing something that you want to share with the respiratory community through a poster at AARC, highly recommend that. That is a great experience. I've been fortunate enough to speak a couple of times at AARC Congress, but this past year was the first time I was ever able actually to present a poster, and it is a different feel, but it is also really cool. So I really enjoyed that and encourage anybody else to jump on that. If you have some research that you and your facility are working on, definitely recommend that. Current issue. Oh, there we go. Staring me right in the face. All right. Just looking through here. Yes, that was one that may be impactful here. So I actually just saw this on LinkedIn also. Prediction of hospital readmission using the CORE and CORE Plus scores in persons with COPD. So this was on a hospital facility that looked at this COPD readmission score, as well as a newly developed enhanced one, the CORE Plus. The relationship between CORE and CORE Plus scores, as well as ICU admission, intubation, and NIV was explored. And they found that these two score paradigms demonstrated good to very good predictive accuracy for 30 and 60-day readmission, respectively. Moreover, this study demonstrated a linear relationship between in-hospital NIV use and core plus score, which again kind of makes sense. If you are sick enough to require a little bit more advanced intervention, probably means that you are at greater risk of, you're sicker, so you're probably at greater risk of bouncing back a little bit more. So that will be really interesting to follow, especially as hospitals continue to look at strategies for reducing, especially those 30-day readmissions, so that it can reduce the impact, the financial impact of penalization and things like that. Let's see what else we have from. This reminds me, I have to get information about our newsletter out. It's been a hectic week, but I got to make sure I work on that today. So. Got to make sure all my ducks are in a row. All right, so what else do we have? What else do we have out here? Pulmonology news. World Sleep Day. So happy World Sleep Day today, as a matter of fact, to our colleagues over in the sleep membership section. Nice little write-up on heliopulmonology, talking about World Sleep Day 2025, celebrating it across specialties because it touches every organ, which is very true. So this is a nice article that has some highlights about the impact on health. Of course, probably largely preaching to the choir on that one. But it is what it is. Always nice to see colleagues get recognized like that. All right. There we go. So that is World Sleep Day today. Perhaps celebrate that tonight with a nice round of sleep. Make sure you get your 8 hours in tonight. What else we have going on? So actually, I'm going to take a break from the news for a second and go back to one of the things I was contemplating earlier today is, as we talk about things like the SOAR Act and lobbying efforts, because AARC is definitely involved in those kinds of efforts as well. AARC is a huge supporter of the SOAR Act. Last year, right now, I know the big push is for some report language coming out to really study the impact of lack of access to respiratory services on the chronic lung disease community. But again, I'm sure as we're moving forward into Hill Days and things like that, I know AARC is going to be a big proponent of that. And another part of that is trying to get people to send emails and calls and things like that to your legislators. And one of the things that I've noticed over the years is sometimes it seems a little difficult to make the argument for folks who aren't necessarily in these weeds all the time. I mean, again, those of us who are in ambulatory and post-acute care settings, working with the DME industry, working on advocacy efforts, we get all this stuff, and it's very applicable to our day-to-day. But that's not always an obvious, not always an obvious presentation to somebody who is still working in the hospital at the bedside, or somebody who is a neoped specialist or things like that. So the question then becomes, how do we make that sales pitch and engage those therapists in becoming more active, in supporting efforts that maybe aren't necessarily impactful to their day-to-day. Because I know, this is a world where we all have limited attention spans, limited resource reservoirs and things like that. We have to be judicious about where we spend our time and energy. And one of the things that I would really like to start pushing this year, I think, is building out some explainers for that. So, again, like let's look at the acute care therapist, because, most RTs work in that acute care setting. How do we make sure that those folks really understand the impact of um, um, something like the SOAR Act, and making sure that we're getting paid for RTs in the home and things like that? And to me, the first thing that comes to mind is you may not always want to be working in the acute care setting. I, believe it or not, never really set out to be the COPD dude or the oxygen guy or any of those things. I thought I was going to be, back in the early days of my career, I thought I was going to be the APRV guy. That was the cool, experimental, exciting kind of stuff. And I thought, well, yeah, this is where I want to be. But life has a way of happening, and took me down this path where now I'm in this role and trying to build out other roles for RTs like this. And so it's difficult to really predict where your future lies in this field, because there are really a lot of opportunities out there, and you don't have to restrict yourself to a limited view. So that's one strategy, but again, that's kind of still in the abstract. There are a lot. It's really difficult. The flip side of not knowing where you're going to be in 10 years is not knowing where you're going to be in 10 years, right? So it's a little bit of, you can say, well, yeah, I might want to have that kind of opportunity someday, but it's lower on the priority list. And similarly, the ideas of, well, you should do it because it's part of being a professional and things like that. I mean, it's all true, but it's a difficult pitch sometimes with folks, again, as we're trying to make that value proposition. So maybe we can look at things like, okay, so you are, you're an inpatient therapist. You are, working to get this person out, and get them home, working with the discharge team and things like that. But you aren't able to work with an RT to really make sure that they understand their stuff going home. There is a role for inpatient RTs to play in that care transition. That's why we're sort of getting away from the idea of discharge and more into the idea of transitions, care navigation, things like that, because what happens in the hospital can affect the home and vice versa. We were just talking about those readmissions. We don't want that to happen, right? We don't want those patients coming back in 30 days. And so how do we do that? Well, part of that is making sure they know how to use their equipment, making sure that they have the right equipment to go home that's going to meet their needs. It doesn't really do somebody any good to, for example, give them a portable concentrator that only puts out, maybe 1.5 liters a minute altogether, and even that's pulse dose. Doesn't really do them a lot of good with that device if they're on 3 liters of continuous flow. It doesn't make a lot of sense to try and get them into, can they get to a pulmonary rehab, with enough supplies and things like that. So there's really an important role to play, again, in that care coordination thing. And again, I know a lot of inpatient RTs are already cramped for time, and that's not necessarily their jam, but there are a lot of RTs that are involved in that process, even outside of those care navigation RTs. So I want to start, putting that kind of thing forward. Neonatal and pediatric RTs, again, most of the time we have this stereotype of people on oxygen therapy being older, they've been smoking a long time, so on and so forth. And they're kind of, it's not at all a neonatal perspective or a pediatric perspective, but there are plenty of kids who need oxygen therapy or who need an IV or mechanical ventilation, trach care, all these things that happen in the home environment. And again, we want to, this particular bill is targeted mostly at oxygen therapy, but again, this opens those opportunities in these settings for other RTs. If we're starting to pay somebody to be able to pay somebody to go out and teach somebody how to use their oxygen, can we also teach them how to use their inhalers while we're there? Can we also look at their home environment and see, are there any obvious fall risks and things like that? What are those values that we can do? Again, reducing that burden of readmission across the age continuum too. Because, again, we've got all of these kids that are out there and making sure that, they're supported too. Education, same deal. We want to make sure that we're teaching the future generations of RTs that, first of all, we want to teach them that these positions are available, but we also want to make sure that they are available so that, as we continue to build this profession out, we want to make sure that, though if we're telling students these opportunities are going to be there for you, we want to make sure we're able to follow through on that. So I think there's an argument to be made, across all of the membership sections. And so I'm looking forward to working more closely with a lot of these membership, the chairs of the membership sections to really kind of polish the messaging a little bit more and hopefully make these some points of engagement to get everybody together and again, pulling on that rope, rowing the boat a little bit more. So that was my soapbox for that 10 minutes. Let's see, just scrolling back through to see if we've got any comments to address. Not so far. So I will say we do, I do try and do these office hours weekly every Friday, because we do have a monthly membership section meeting, which is coming up, as a matter of fact, I believe that is next week. And that's open to everybody. You don't necessarily have to be a section member to participate. Yeah, that's next week at 4 o'clock on Wednesday via Zoom. We're also going to have, we've started to bring in some guest speakers to talk about experiences throughout the ambulatory and post-acute care continuum. So again, this is a really cool opportunity to make some connections if you're in the space, to learn a little bit more if you're interested in the space, or to send your students along and expose them to the space. I'm excited to that this week I was able to speak with 2 candidates for student ambassador for this membership section. So hopefully we're going to be gearing that up again a little bit, and really trying to do more of that outreach with our early professionals, our students and early professionals, to again make this pathway a little bit easier. This is, again, speaking from my personal experiences of somebody who had not really set out to do this. There were some times where I just kind of was able to fall into an opportunity or things like that, but I would love to establish more pathways that can help people be a little bit more mindful and intentional about how they're building out their career. So exciting opportunities for that coming up. Let's see, we're also getting into conference season. I know there's one going on somewhere. California just wrapped up. I know I want to say it's maybe Delaware, somewhere out east. There's a conference going on. My good friend, a couple of my good friends, Mandy DeVries from the AARC office, and of course Mindy Conklin, the world's first advanced practice respiratory therapist, are out at that particular one, although I can't remember where it is offhand right now. Florida Society is coming up at the end of the month. My home state here in Michigan is coming up at the beginning of April. Wisconsin and Minnesota, the northern, they do one together. I can't remember what, excuse me, Northern Regional Respiratory Conference, maybe they call it. That's coming up in May. I'm excited to be able to be speaking there on a couple of different things, including advocacy and how advocacy can, how professional advocacy and personal advocacy and patient advocacy are really intertwined. I feel I've had a pretty interesting journey. I've certainly had a lot of really cool opportunities that keep kind of compounding as I go on some of that journey. So I'm really excited to share that with folks. Also coming up in May is the American Thoracic Society. I'm happy to promote any other conferences and stuff that are coming out. Really want to make this, ideally, I would like to promote other people instead of talking for the whole hour here. So I really like to have good conversations going. This is a new initiative, so we're still building an audience for it, but I'm excited to start building, this platform and making these as accessible as possible for folks to learn a little bit more about what we do in this setting. So all of that said, I think I've covered pretty much all the big news going on right now. Coming up with some other stuff, again, looking ahead to conference season and everything else coming on. I'm sure things are going to start picking up as we get closer to ATS. A lot of stuff coming out with that. Usually comes out around that time of year. I went to my first, it's been 12 months of firsts, actually. I went to my first American Thoracic Society last year, which was a remarkable experience. It's a huge conference. Just just huge. That's all that really can be said about it. And then a couple of weeks ago, right before we went to DC, I went to MedTrade for the first time, which is the largest home medical equipment conference in the U.S. And that was also very, very eye-opening. Made some good contacts there, and really excited to not only build out the world of home respiratory equipment, but seeing how things can kind of tie together. For example, as I mentioned, I work for the COPD Foundation, deal a lot with folks with COPD. There are a couple of companies out there that use that make maybe you've seen those recliners that will help somebody stand up. They're powered recliners, and they go from sit to stand, and help people who may be a little bit more frail and may have some balance issues, or just not that leg strength to stand up. There's I believe 2 companies that make toilet seats that do that same thing. It's a framework that kind of goes over your toilet and helps you stand up from that. And again, that's not necessarily an obvious collaboration with folks who live with COPD, but it's probably kind of important. They raised some really good points as I was talking with some of the vendors about how this is usually something that people don't think about until they can't do it, and then the option is to go into assisted living, and something like that will give somebody a little bit more freedom, potentially to stay mobile, stay at home, stay independent, beyond that. So the value of a lot of the conferences like that, I think, are really they really help build those connections. That's just something that we can't really do virtually. Sometimes we can see these things on LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter. We can have these Zoom meetings where we're trying to figure out what next steps are and everything else, but until you can actually go and see these connections and really start thinking and brainstorming, those are really cool opportunities. So whatever conference it is, whether it's a state respiratory conference, whether it is one of these bigger, more holistic conferences, I really encourage everybody to go out and spend what time you can at these. Again, I know it's really easy to, especially as someone that's kind of part of my job to do these. It's easy to say, oh yeah, everybody should do that. But if you have an opportunity, take advantage of it. I know, again, they're not cheap or anything like that, but try and get to some of these. Try and present at some of these. We do a lot of really cool work in respiratory care, and we should be sharing that more. We had and it's good to see new people coming out there. I'll send out another shout out to my friend Sarah Melville, who gave a presentation on pulmonary rehab. Was it day before yesterday, Wednesday, for the AARC webcast. And she's relatively new to speaking, but she had a fantastic experience. The office helped her out. The viewers had some really good, engaging questions. Had a really good experience and wants to do more of that. So, if you are, there's a fairly frequent refrain I've heard over the years is a lot of times. We kind of get to see the same faces a lot, and I count myself in that these days. And again, never thought I was really going to be in that space, but I do a fair bit of speaking. But I would love to see other people start building up with that, because we need different perspectives. We need different representation. We need people at different parts of their career. I think it would be great to have more student kind of presentations. Whether they're again, and maybe some of us who have been around, seen a thing or two, because know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two. Maybe it would be kind of old hat for us, but maybe we can, again, the AARC has done a great job with things like the Speaker Academy, but what if we could do something like that even with students? And, maybe it's not a groundbreaking presentation or something like that, but let's build that into some of the mentorship and things like that we're trying to do. Again, just brainstorming here. It's not like I've made up, even, I'm not saying that AARC is not willing to do that by any means. This is the first they're hearing of it too. But I think it would be really cool to, again, just build out some of these new things. So ultimately, if you have an opportunity to go to a conference, take advantage of that. If you have an idea to speak at a conference, take some swings. A lot of times you'll get some free CRCE out of it. Most conferences will give you free registration for the day that you're speaking. Take advantage of it. It's kind of a 2-for-1 there. You can do some learning and do some teaching at the same time. So definitely take advantage of that. It's a great experience all around, great networking, all that. So with that, I think I've run out of stuff to filibuster with. So we'll go ahead and call it a few minutes early today. Like I said, trying to build these out, would much rather have a good conversation, as we've had on a couple of these. You can go back and look at some of the recordings. There are discussions about, how do we actually achieve the goals we set out for ourselves as an organization, as a section, as individuals. I'd love to see more of that outside of our section meeting, again, coming up next Wednesday. But I'd love to see that here in this kind of forum too, because I know not everybody has the access to to these things. So we're trying to make it as easy to access as possible, so that we can get as many people involved in AARC functions and section functions as we possibly can. So with that, I appreciate you taking the time to either catch this live. I see a couple of folks out there in the audience, or to catch this on the recording. And please feel free to drop any suggestions for comments, drop any other comments that you might have to continue the discussion asynchronously. Put those in the comments. Send me an email. Let me know what's something you would want to talk about. If you have something that you really want to, you've been involved with and you want to share, let me know, and we'll get you scheduled for one of these when I'm not traveling, and we'll let you share your voice a little bit and share the cool projects you're working on. So until then, happy Pi Day. I don't think I said that at the top of the hour here, but happy Pi Day to everybody who celebrates. Coming up on Monday, happy St. Patrick's Day, so make sure that you are celebrating safely and responsibly. And take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we'll see you next week here on AARC, Ambulatory and Post-Acute Care Office Hours. Thanks, everybody.